Hey, deserving listeners. So today's episode is a mini deep dive on the concept of weaponized incompetence. I have been seeing a lot of chatter about this concept over the last few years online, I think particularly on TikTok, and I wanted to lock down a definition while also providing some nuance and context and an evaluation of all the elements of the definition. So let's get into it. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. I was trying to find out why it became a viral idea over the last few years. I wasn't even really quite sure if it was. It was just sort of my sense. But I came across this article on wondermind.com, and they claim to have an explanation as to why it has been more popular lately. I don't know if this is accurate, but I thought I would share it. They write, "The hype around this term of weaponized incompetence first started making the rounds on TikTok back in 2021 after Laura Danger, apparently a TikToker, Laura Danger responded to a viral video of a man who fell asleep when he was supposed to be watching his baby while his wife took a shower. She said this is an example of how incompetence is weaponized. So instead of being an equal responsive partner, the father slept on the job." Okay, so I could see that scenario where there's a video of a husband who is sleeping while he's supposed to be watching a child. I mean, it sounds kind of dangerous, right? And I could imagine a lot of people relating to this, right? In a variety of ways, how it reveals a common experience. And with terms like this on the internet, there's positive and neutral and negative elements of these trends, like with the term gaslighting or narcissist or something. I have my own opinion as to the ratio of good to bad in these trends. I would say with the trend of weaponized incompetence, it's mostly good. I'm a fan of this being talked about. It is often misused for sure, but it's a concept that illuminates something that is more subtle in the patriarchy and in sexism, in that in the past, you would have more overt sexist patriarchal ideas, like in a cis-het marriage. You would have these very out in the open biases and power dynamics where the husband might say, "You're the wife. You do all the chores and you do all the house. You do all the child rearing. And I do none of that because I'm the man, and that's just the way that it is, even though we both work full-time jobs," that kind of thing. And in mainstream American culture, there's enough awareness that you're not going to find men will say that very often. Do men say it today? Yeah, absolutely. But it's manifested in a more subtle way. One of those subtle ways often is through weaponized incompetence. So we're seeing perhaps some of the last gasps of the patriarchy in this way, and we have to snuff it out. So identifying this and raising awareness about it, and honestly giving the perpetrators of it an opportunity to look at it, because I think a lot of people will use weaponized incompetence and not really ever think about it long enough to question whether or not it's okay to do so, So I'm overall a fan, and this has been something that my field has been talking about for a long time within psychotherapy, psychology, feminism, this well understood, empirically found trend of as women gain more power and equality, they are working more, and also as you have a capitalistic system that pushes people to earn more money and to survive. Often you need two incomes in a home is the point to survive. But at any rate, in cis-het marriages, you're having more women work outside the home, and yet women are still required and often performing most, if not all, of the household chores and child rearing responsibilities, even though both partners work. Sometimes it's really exaggerated. It's really exaggerated in that you have the wife, the mother, who is working more, earning more, and doing all the chores and all the child rearing. Meanwhile, the husband is maybe even unemployed and he's playing video games all day, And so there's a lot of reasons for this. The things that we're talking about today have to do with sexism and bias and expectations. But, there are other reasons as to why you would have that scenario, like a husband who doesn't work and plays video games all day and doesn't do any of the household chores. And I'll get into that. You can't just look at that scenario and assume that it's due to weaponized incompetence or due to sexism or something. There's a lot of other factors as it's case-by-case basis. And this is one of the misusages that I will see on the internet, is that it's reduced often, even in articles that are written on psychology websites, it's reduced to observational behaviors. Like in the example I gave, you have a husband who doesn't work, who plays video games all day, and the wife works maybe 1.5 full-time jobs, and she's doing all the chores, blah, blah, or most of them. And we look at that and say, oh, look at that guy. He's using weaponized incompetence. Well, it could be something else. He could be depressed. She could be abusive. It's not likely, but it could be. He could actually be trying and have tried in the past to have more equality and do more, and she has beaten him down emotionally such that he's given up, or he's afraid to do chores for fear that she will come down on him like a ton of bricks because he's done it wrong or something. There's so many reasons you can have dependent personality disorder, and I'll get into that in a bit. But this term is often overused or misapplied in this very haphazard way, similar to things like gaslighting, this kind of thing. It's hard to understand, and I want to lay out my definition of this that is based on the way people are using it, but I think is it is more narrow than the general usage. But anyway, now another element that should be mentioned here is that on the internet, the manosphere, the red pillars and the incels of the world, are reacting against this notion of weaponized incompetence, because weaponized incompetence is often used as a way of highlighting how men are not pulling their weight at home. Sometimes in legitimate efforts and sometimes not. But either way, the manosphere isn't going to react well with that. So they are claiming that women are basically just attacking men and are using this pop psychology term to do so. For example, I found someone on Reddit saying the following. Let's see. They say, weaponized incompetence applies a gendered double standard. If a man doesn't know how to pack a school lunch, he's called lazy. But if a woman doesn't know how to fix a breaker or set up the Wi-Fi, it's totally acceptable, and she's just a girl. Men are expected to learn feminine-coded tasks or else, while women are rarely pressured to master masculine-coded ones. End of Reddit post or comment or something. And yeah, there's some legitimacy to that, but to completely reject the notion of gender inequality or of weaponized incompetence is silly. But yeah, it's case by case. Can you have a scenario where in a cishet marriage where the wife is also using weaponized incompetence, but it's not labeled that because TikTok doesn't talk about it? Yeah, absolutely. Anyone can use weaponized incompetence. And to be frank, I've used weaponized incompetence at work many years ago, and I'm proud of it. So and I'll get into that later. So I also thought I would read some kind of ridiculous writing about it, about weaponized incompetence. This next set of quotes are from parents.com. And maybe parents.com is a great website. I don't know. But the writing of a couple articles that they had on weaponized incompetence seemed lacking. So this quote I'll just read here. It says, weaponized incompetence occurs when one person in a relationship appears to be less capable than they really are, says Cynthia Vehar, PhD, LPC, LSC, PPS, NCC, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so there's so many things. All right. So first off, let's just evaluate this definition. Weaponized incompetence occurs when one person in a relationship appears to be less capable than they really are. So maybe, but that is too broad of a definition. And I'll get more into that later. Because if someone appears to be less competent, less capable than they really are, that depends on how you're perceiving them. Again, I'll get more into it later. But this is a side note, pet peeve of mine, is when therapists put like every possible alphabet soup is it alphabet soup? Anyway, where therapists have a lot of, are they called acronyms? PhD, LPC, LSC, PPS, NCC. So let's break this down, because for me, I could have, a dozen of those after my name when I am interviewed or when on my card or something. And this has always bugged me. And honestly, I did this in the very beginning of my career because I was insecure about who I was as a professional. And I felt like if I had more letters after my name, it made me look more competent. But it doesn't. To me, it's just me. And I'll get people attacking me for saying this because I'm attacking them to some extent. I guess they're just defending themselves. But I've always said that if I see a bunch of letters that are clearly unnecessary after someone's name, then you look like a hack and you come across like a novice who's insecure. And I'm actually thinking you're less competent than I would otherwise, because it sounds like you're trying to prop up your knowledge or your professionalism when you don't have it inherently or something. But let's break down these things. So we have Cynthia Vehar, PhD. Okay, yeah, that's pretty standard to have your degree, especially if it's a doctorate. Sometimes people will put their master's like MA or MS, but if you have the next one, which is LPC, Licensed Professional Counselor, it's automatically understood that you at least have a master's. So in my mind, you should never have your master's after your. It depends on the context too. Like if you're authoring a book, that's kind of different than if you're on a website or your professional card or something like this. And I say necessary things after that. Well, so let me talk about the next ones. So the next one, so PhD, LPC, to me, that's all that's needed. Your degree, you want to highlight the fact that you have a doctorate as opposed to a master's, I would think, and that you're a licensed professional counselor, LPC. Yeah, and that's all you need. After that, there's this other one, LSCPPS, which I think stands for Licensed School Counselor, something else. And okay, I guess, and maybe that highlights the fact that you're mainly working in schools. I don't know, but it's a lot of letters for not much of a payoff. But the last one is the one that really is stupid. And I think I did this in the beginning of my career 30 years ago. NCC, it stands for National Certified Counselor. So it's like a professional credential. Long story short, it's extremely minor in terms of what it's communicating. You're an LPC, stand tall. You're a licensed professional counselor and you have a PhD. That's a big deal. The rest of it is not necessary, particularly when someone's writing an article. Now, maybe the author of this article on parents.com did this without asking Cynthia Vehar, and Cynthia Vehar is just like, why are you putting all those letters after my name? It's taking up half the article, my letters. Because people will do that to me sometimes. They'll pull stuff from the internet and think, anyway. Okay. Feel free to email me via the website if you have a problem with that. I've never been convinced otherwise. And, who cares? If someone looks like a hack to me and not to others, you do you, whatever. Going on with this website article, parents.com. So again, they say weaponized incompetence occurs when one person in a relationship appears to be less capable than they really are. To me, that's too simplistic, and there's too many nuances that are missing there. But going on. Later on in the article, it says, if one parent feels as though they cannot rely on their partner to help with parenting and household duties, that could be obvious. There's a typo on the article. That could be an obvious sign of weaponized incompetence, says Jocelyn Beebe, LCSW, a licensed clinical social worker. Okay, just another side note. It's redundant. You're saying Jocelyn Beebe, LCSW, a licensed clinical. That's what LCSW means. So if you're going to write out a licensed clinical social worker, don't include LCSW. Anyway. But before they get going here, they say, if one parent feels as though they cannot rely on their partner to help with parenting and household duties, that could be an obvious sign of weaponized incompetence. No, that's too simplistic. Now, I don't blame the therapists that they're reaching out to. I've been interviewed for articles like this many times. And a lot of the times it's just over the phone, right? So they'll just ask a question, and, if I don't have notes in front of me, I'll just kind of ramble. And the journalist will pull from that rambling a quote, but I wasn't allowed to give the full definition, or I kind of flubbed it because I'm in between clients or something. So I don't blame the therapists, but I just want to say that the article, in terms of trying to really delineate weaponized incompetence from other things, the article either was slapped together very quickly, or they just didn't really understand, or they were using a lot of the ways it's being used on TikTok to inform the way that they define it. But anyway, going on with the article, here are some, and by the way, I'll get into my definition in a second. I just want to kind of lay out where I'm, this is why I want to talk about it, is because there is so much fogginess around this concept online, and I'm predicting in 5 years it'll become more annoyingly so, the same way that gaslighting and narcissism and love bombing and all these terms just spin out of control on TikTok. It's just like its primary reason for existing is to annoy me in that way. But anyway, going on with the article, here are some other telltale signs you're in a relationship with someone who uses weaponized incompetence. So just think about that. Here are some other telltale signs. So just, extremely indicative. These things are slam dunk indications that you have a partner who is using weaponized incompetence. So they have 15 things here. You have more responsibility or do most of the work. Okay. So there's a lot of nuances to that, which I'll get into later, because most people think they're doing most of the household chores. When you ask people of any gender, what percentage of the household chores you're doing, most people think they're doing more than 50%, but that's not mathematically possible. How could everyone be doing more than 50%, So, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, one is that we don't see our partners doing chores, and unless we extend our mind past what we actually are visibly seeing, then we will mistakenly conclude that we're doing more. Now, maybe we are doing more, but anyway. So you are doing more responsibility. You have more responsibility, or you're doing most of the work. Okay. Again, is your partner depressed? That doesn't mean they're off the hook, but it doesn't mean that your partner is using weaponized incompetence, which is a very specific, intentional thing. But anyway, another item here. You feel taken advantage of or taken for granted. Okay. Not necessarily. That's not a slam dunk. Many people in relationships feel taken for granted. In fact, I would say, especially if you have kids, you probably everybody feels at least somewhat taken for granted, because life is a struggle and none of us get enough support or praise, you know what I mean? So now, could that be a sign? Sure, but it's not a telltale sign. Okay, going on. There is an expectation that you will take care of daily tasks and household chores. Yeah, that's a pretty good sign. You feel alone in the relationship or like a single parent. Yeah, that's a pretty good sign, but again, it depends on the scenario. And that's what's really lacking in the online discourse often, is that they skip the foundation of the term and just and leapfrog to the signs or to, you know, just people being annoyed. And here's my general statement about all these misused terms: narcissist, gaslighting, love bombing, and weaponized incompetence. Is that you have a lot of people who are legitimately being harmed, and they are looking for answers naturally. And we have increasing awareness of psychology and of therapy. And it's so much more satisfying to have some kind of label, some diagnosis, you know. He's a narcissist, d. Instead of what really is likely happening, which is there is no label. There is no slam dunk indication that you're right about your perspective. You know, there's a lot of people walking around feeling invalidated and desperate. It's similar to when you have ongoing fatigue or backache or migraines or something, and you go to the doctor and they don't have an explanation at first, and you're just like, God, I just need it. It's the same, and so a lot of people are suffering. But we need to push back on that, because we don't want to dilute terms across scenarios where it doesn't apply, because that dilutes the experience. It makes it meaningless. You know, when I hear people calling someone a narcissist today, I don't regard anything about what they said, because it's completely meaningless now. Whereas like 20 years ago, if I heard someone say that, I would have regarded it. So we need to have language, have meaning, so that we can communicate with each other, and we can't dilute a term. It's like the word literally. We need to have some guardrails. I'm not saying we like attack people, but anyway, especially in the field of psychology. Okay, another sign here. They're saying you're feeling burnt out, resentful, or stressful from all your responsibilities. So this is a telltale sign that your partner is using intentional, weaponized incompetence. You feel burnt out, resentful, or stressed out from all your responsibilities. What? That's not, maybe, but what if you have a really crappy life and you're struggling with poverty, and both people feel stressed out from their responsibilities? Does that mean both people have partners that are using weaponized incompetence? Another one here is you hear the same excuses over and over again, like, I don't know how to do that, you're better at it, I don't have time. So this is a better indicator of weaponized incompetence, which I'll get to later. Your partner struggles only with tasks they don't want to do, but are competent at their own work or career. Yeah, that's a pretty good sign. That's the first one that I would say is the most indicative of weaponized incompetence. Your partner struggles only with tasks that they don't want to do, even though they're competent in other areas. Yeah, absolutely. And it's in the phrasing, right? You know that your partner doesn't want to, say, clean the bathroom, and they really struggle with it, even though they're competent in a lot of other arenas. Like, why are they so incompetent with such a simple thing like cleaning the bathroom? Well, it's because weaponized incompetence. Yeah. Another sign, they're saying your partner has no desire to learn how to do certain tasks. Yeah, again, it depends. But here's another one. Your partner plays dumb or has a help me attitude. Again, not necessarily. Could be, but not necessarily. Your partner uses guilt or manipulation when you ask them to do something. Yeah, as long as you're reading it right. Another one here. Your partner knowingly performs tasks poorly to manipulate you into doing it on your own next time. Yes. And this list is really funny because the later signs are basically just the definition of it. So it's not really a sign, right? It's just like, what's a sign that I have cancer? And then after all these bullshit kind of signs, there's a final sign. It's just like, one of the signs that you have cancer is that you have cancer. Here's a sign that your partner is using weaponized incompetence. Your partner knowingly performs tasks poorly to manipulate into doing it on your own next time. Yeah, that's literally the definition of weaponized incompetence. Your partner shifts blame and accuses you of not giving them appropriate instructions. Not necessarily, but maybe. Okay. So let's take a break here. The rest of this episode is going to be for patrons of the podcast because I want to reward the patrons for literally paying my bills so that I can do all this stuff. And yeah, so if you want to hear this mini deep dive, which there's a lot to get into, become a patron on patreon.com of Psychology in Seattle. Join us. Be one of us. Otherwise, take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.